This is For Keeps, a podcast about collections and connections. I'm David Peterkowski. Paintings of clowns, Beatles cake toppers, disco lunchboxes. The concept of kitsch encompasses all of these wacky things, and so much more. So much, in fact, that the definition of kitsch is kind of like that Supreme Court justice's vague definition of obscenity from back in the day. You know it when you see it. Without a doubt, one person who knows kitsch is Allee Willis. And she certainly sees plenty of it, too. Throughout her pale pink, streamlined modern house in Los Angeles' San Fernando Valley, Allee's got an endless array of kitschy knickknacks on display. Photos of her one-of-a-kind home reveal shelves lined with 50s, 60s, and 70s pop culture memorabilia, including at least one dancing disco doll, a number of retro globe-shaped televisions, humorously dated advertising, statuettes including a piggy bank resembling 80s tough guy Mr. T, and more bobbleheads than you can shake a head at. And then there's the cherished display of Allee's Soul Kitsch collection, featuring vintage African-American products ranging from hand puppets to black-themed board games to a Diana Ross doll. Mixed in among all the kitsch are awards, a lot of them. You see, Allee Willis is a Grammy and Tony-winning songwriter, with a wall full of gold and platinum records to show for her efforts. In the 1970s, she famously co-wrote the monster hits Boogie Wonderland and September for Earth, Wind & Fire. In the 80s, she collaborated on more hits, including The Neutron Dance for the Pointer Sisters and What Have I Done to Deserve This by the Pet Shop Boys and Dusty Springfield. And in the 90s, she co-wrote the song I'll Be There For You by the Rembrandts, better known as the theme song to the TV show Friends. Allee followed up her hit-making heyday by turning to musical theater, co-writing the music to the stage adaptation of The Color Purple, which gave her that Tony Award. In June 2018, she was inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame as part of an impressive cohort that included Neil Diamond, John Mellencamp, and Alan Jackson. Allee's also worked as a visual artist and a set designer for television, and she's also gained quite the reputation over the years for throwing epic parties, where celebrity guests sing, dance, and even play crazy party games like Tampax Toss, a game that Cher once won by tossing a ball with a tampon attached through a vintage toilet seat hung from a plant. The New York Times published that fun fact in a recent profile of Allee, so it must be true. As a pop music liner note nerd from way back, I've known Allee's name for decades, and when I found out about her curation of kitsch and her long-standing online archive known as the Allee Willis Museum of Kitsch, I decided to give her a call to learn more. In our conversation, she told me about how a job as an MTV set designer brought out her kitsch cravings, the crazy story of how she acquired her favorite item from the estate of entertainer Sammy Davis Jr., and how her kitsch collection received the ultimate seal of approval from musical royalty, the godfather of soul himself. So I'm not sure exactly where to begin because I have a lot of questions about your collecting, but I also want to touch on your music and your famous parties, so it'll probably all get mixed together.
Yeah, they do all mix together.
I figured. So why don't we start on the collecting front? Can you walk us through your personal definition of kitsch and what it is about kitsch that resonates with you as a collector?
My definition, and I was, by the way, in the dictionary.com definition of it for many years. My definition really differs from the classic definition because the classic definition is, stuff that is very kind of overdone, overwrought, and garish taste. My stuff is just stuff that is slightly left of center. I pretty much concentrate on pop culture stuff. And where there's something really off about it, but it's always something that makes you smile. Like an example I could give you is, like, let's say if you collect Michael Jackson. The normal collection would have the Michael Jackson doll, that'd have the glove. It would be stuff sanctioned by Michael Jackson or, in this case, the estate. My stuff is, like, I have this little rubber balcony almost, and Michael Jackson is holding blankets, and you can push the figure so it dangles the baby over the balcony. So that is nothing that Michael Jackson would have ever put out.
Or blanket.
Or blankets, certainly, yeah. Or like if you collect Beatles, everyone has, the wallet, and they have the little, a little thing to hold your records. But, what I cherish most there is, they called them cake toppers. It was really just these 4 plastic heads of the Beatles that you would literally just plop into the frosting, but not one of them actually looks like the right Beatle. They all look like bad Ringos, basically. And a lot of stuff like black stuff specifically where they just misname stuff or do stuff wrong. Like I have this pair of it was called Touch of Soul pantyhose, and it's this classic, red, green, and black packaging, and the girl's got this giant afro, but then the shade of the pantyhose is off black. So, if they spent 3 seconds thinking about that, they would have changed it. And last example I'll give you, just because I'm staring at it right now. I'm from Detroit. Motown meant everything to me. So I collect a lot of Motown stuff, but I have the wrapper that went on a loaf of bread that was called the Supreme's white bread. So the fact that, and this was in 1966, civil rights movement, and you're giving the Supreme's white bread. So just the fact that someone didn't go, no, it should have been pumpernickel, or, it's at least rye. So that kind of stuff just kills me. I used to hate stuff, what I considered kitsch, which was, the old classic definition of it. Statues of David with gold flake on them. That kind of stuff I hated. But I think it was 1989 to 1991, I was the art director and production designer on the very first MTV clip show, which was called Just Say Julie. And she wanted, a very kitschy set. We both kind of used that term. And up until then, my collection had really been 1950s, 60s, and 70s modern. Everything from furniture to cars, but very, what I would consider really kind of classy taste. And we went to a swamp meet together, and we were just shopping for things on the set. And there was this oil painting of 3 clowns drinking coffee. Now, I always hated clowns, and they were, painted to look like real people. It wasn't like caricatures or anything. But the fact that they were just sipping the coffee, and I thought, if I buy this, and my agreement was that the salary was almost nothing, but I could keep everything that we bought. If I buy this, I'm crossing a line, into the kind of stuff that is considered kitschy, but I always considered myself to have much better taste. So we bought the clown painting, and then just one by one, we started buying all kinds of that kind of crap, like a matching pot holder, like in a towel, but they're crocheted, and the pot holder has a fake plastic doll head in the middle of it. I hated that kind of stuff, but it's really what we needed for the set. And we did the show for 3 years. So by the end of the 3 years, I was so completely hooked on the stuff. And I live in a house, and I've lived here for over 30 years, that was built as the party house for MGM in 1937. So it's an incredible party house, and it's an incredible place to display stuff. And probably because that stuff was televised, that's kind of what I got known for. Even though before all of that, any press that was done on me always featured the 50s and 60s stuff. It's just that I broadened from kind of modern taste into kitschy taste, but my favorite still being those decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, sometime the 80s, and, after that, only if it's something like, Michael Jackson dangling blanket over the balcony.
Hard to resist that one.
Yeah.
And so you got to keep the items you got for the show, is that right?
Yeah, because the budgets were so low, there wasn't really enough money. I think I got like $500. But then, I had a budget for the set. I'm sure she let me keep them just because it meant they didn't have to pay for storage, But anyway, that's how that happened. And then I just got known for it, and everyone started calling it Kitsch. And even though the term kind of offended me about the collection, it just kind of became the easiest way to describe stuff. And then in 2009, just for a few years, I had a social network called Allee Willis Museum of Kitsch. And that's, then when the whole thing, it's like, okay, I'm never going to escape this term.
I keep thinking about the clowns having coffee painting, and it reminds me of kind of like the dogs playing poker painting.
Yeah, see, that kind of stuff I absolutely hated. But the more I collected this, and especially when I started the social network, which was about not just my collection, but I really wanted it to be kind of largest collection worldwide of kitsch. So, people started submitting their stuff. The dogs playing poker was the kind of stuff that they had. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to go with this. I mean, ultimately, it was about looking at something and just thinking whoever did this had a great sense of humor. And the fact that something like that got ubiquitous enough that we both knew what you were talking about when you said it, that's what's fascinating to me.
I agree. And so does the term Museum of Kitsch now refer to your house?
No, but every single person in the world thinks that's it. So I always try and explain it, but that just persists. The house is actually called Willis Wonderland after my Earth, Wind and Fire hit Boogie Wonderland. And the museum, the Allee Willis Museum of Kitsch, was strictly an online thing. And it's still up there. I just don't curate it anymore. So it's up there as an archival site of, the largest collection of kitsch on the planet. It's not active anymore. Like you can't comment anymore or communicate and I don't curate it anymore. Whatever it was when I stopped doing it is exactly what it is.
Well, kitsch is forever, so you don't really need to do much.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So the New York Times recently did a piece on you and they described your collecting style as, and I quote, a vintage gonzo aesthetic. Would you agree with that assessment?
A vintage gonzo. Yeah. Actually, yeah, because it is vintage, and at least what I think gonzo means, which is just kind of over the top. Yeah. I mean, it's every single thing in the house. It's not like, okay, here's the section where the collection is. I mean, everything in the house down to screws in the light plates. It's all part of a collection.
Gotcha. And from the photos I've seen of your home, I noticed a couple of areas that you seem to revel in as a collector, and one is vintage advertising, or maybe it would be more accurate to say vintage commercial products. I saw Pepsi ads.
Well, those are more, that's probably part, and they're here, no question. But those are earlier parts of the collection. So when I was really collecting, had to be of a certain aesthetic, but, really concentrating more on the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The part of the collection that I cherish the most is my African American stuff. I used to work with James Brown, and he was the one that said to me, for the stuff I was collecting, which was a kind of late 60s, early 70s, Black is Beautiful period, with, huge afros and bell bottoms. And he said that kind of stuff, there was no money to distribute it when it was made. So if a product was made in Cleveland, it wasn't going to get much farther than, Detroit. And he said to me, this is like a museum already. You have to promise me that you'll keep collecting it. And so on his word, I did. And that's like my absolute favorite part, because that stuff is just so obscure. And I did have in my collection, from the earlier part of my collection, I didn't have a lot of this, but I did have like an Aunt Jemima clock, and I had a Sambo, which when most people collect black memorabilia, that's the kind of stuff they collect. And he literally went around the house with me following him around carrying a garbage bag, and he would find a Mammy or a Sambo and literally just pick it up and let it crash in the bag. So I understood from then on, okay, not cool. This is, I'm never touching this stuff again. Which was really important, especially for what I do musically. You don't want that stuff around, and you wrote The Color Purple. So, and people still, someone will go, oh, I found something so great for you. And I'll open it up and it'll be like a Mammy, and I'm just completely horrified.
What about African-American memorabilia appeals to you specifically? Can you put your finger on what it is?
Well, it's that specific period of it, because it was an incredibly powerful period. It was Black is beautiful, really believe in yourself as a culture. And Black music always, especially growing up in Detroit, was my favorite kind of music. So everything that was happening culturally was tied into the music. It just, to me, was this incredibly positive period where people were becoming much more aware of what it was to be Black, and there was a great appreciation of whites towards Black. And, I just always want everyone to be happy. So that's pretty much it. That it was a very, what I considered an incredibly positive time, and that it had such a stamp on the culture. You just have to look at Soul Train and you can see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears and talk about another famous person you spent some time with, and that's Paul Reubens, who, of course, is best known as Pee Wee Herman. I know your TV resume doesn't include Pee Wee's Playhouse, but as I look at pictures of your house, I see a resemblance. Do you think that you sort of influenced that show by osmosis at all?
I'm sure both of us get asked that all the time. We, at that time, were best friends. That's all we would do is go to thrift shops and show each other what we got. So he absolutely had his own thing that was, very much his vision. But because we were together all the time and we knew absolutely everything in each other's collections, I'm sure we influenced each other. But I always get credit for that show, and I had nothing to do with that show. We were just inseparable at that point.
Now, you do have a connection to another popular old show, and that's the long-running sitcom Friends.
Yeah.
Does your collection of Kitsch include, say, Chandler's coffee mug or anything from the set of that show?
No, you know what? I have literally nothing from the show. That's the kind of stuff, what we were originally talking about, where I can't stand that kind of stuff, yet I should have all of it. I have nothing, not even a T-shirt. And I guess I didn't get any of it because I didn't want people to think that that's the kind of stuff that I collected. I mean, I would have collected it if it was a 60s TV show. But by the 90s, when everything was about merchandising, commercialize everything, I didn't want people to think that that's what I collected. But I know me well enough to know that after enough time goes by, I'll probably start buying it all up. And I know there's a lot of it to buy.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
And just to change gears here a bit, can you tell the story of what you found inside Sammy Davis Jr.'s drum?
Oh, well, that's my favorite thing I own. A friend of mine bought his drum set at the Butterfield auction when they sold his estate. And inside of the bass drum was this tiny little box. And it was actually listed in the auction, along with the drums. And it was his very last stash of marijuana. So to me, it was so completely obscure. It was something that no one else could own because there's a lot of Sammy Davis memorabilia. And certainly if there ever was a kitschy performer, though brilliant, but kitschy, it was, Sammy Davis Jr. So to have that last little stash of marijuana just, to me, meant everything.
And it was actually listed, or the box was listed?
Yeah, in the little box that it came in, there's a little insert that says from the estate of Sammy Davis, but I'm pretty sure that my friend is who put that little insert in there. But at the time, they showed me the catalog. You know, it listed the drums, it listed, you know, the drum cases, and, you know, it was something like small box of marijuana, something like that. So that's like my prized possession.
So it didn't just kind of fall out and you're like, what's this? It was
No. They knew what it was. And my friend still has the drums. They're in her living room. They're like gorgeous. They have his name on it. But to me, I'd way rather have, you know, the last stash of marijuana. So.
The Candyman's candy.
Yeah, totally. I started performing live a couple of years ago. It's actually what I enjoy doing most now, even though I was terrified of it for decades. But I do a thing about the marijuana, and then I make the audience sing Candyman. So, which, by the way, I hated at the time, is so much fun to sing now. It's crazy.
I've never tried. I'll have to do that.
Yeah, it's got great background vocals.
So I'm just curious, do you keep track of all the things in your house? Do you have like a spreadsheet?
It is not as formal as that, but I have photos of everything, and I'm extremely organized. I am that way in my work. But were someone to say, give me a list of everything in your house, I couldn't do it. I mean, it is literally everything, and it's a collection that started in 1969, down to the pencils. If it's in here, it's part of the collection.
Yeah, I was just curious how many globe-shaped TVs and radios you have, judging from the pictures I've seen.
Let me see. I can tell you right now. 1, 2. Actively in the house, 4. But I have a 2,000 square foot storage garage that you can't even walk into. And like as the screens would break or the, you know, dials would fall off, they would just kind of get relegated to the garage. You know, and they all worked. Originally, I converted them once analog went away. That was like a horrible day for me. It's just I watched all of the TVs die at the same time.
Ooh.
But I had them converted, but it was by someone who kind of didn't know what they were doing. But I think it's much easier to do that now. So eventually I'll do that too. Now they just sit here and look good.
Yeah, it's not like they're doing nothing.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears yet again. I understand that one of your many talents is as a party host.
Yeah. If you ask me, I'll say that's what I'm best at. I consider myself a supreme party thrower. For me, they are expressions of my art because I don't get a chance a lot to do everything I do in one place. I always describe them as like kids' parties on acid. I do everything from, well, originally, you know, design the invitation, but everything from, you know, I'll do sets, I DJ everything, I'm on mic the entire time so everyone hears every conversation I have. Therefore, I don't really spend time with you, but you feel like you spent the whole evening with me. I, you know, make up games. I always have souvenirs, which I used to always try and find enough of something vintage. Like I'd find 100, I hate to keep bringing this person up, it's the easiest one for me to think of. Like I found 100 Michael Jackson night lights, you know, that you plug it in and his face glowed. But that's just too hard to find now. So I usually end up making stuff. Like it could be a necklace, you know, made out of string and a bagel that I'm like gluing rhinestones on. I mean, you know, not anything that a real party thrower would ever do. And between that and then the house and the collection, I just try and create an environment that when you come into it, all bets are off. You're not self-conscious because everyone's wearing a bagel or, you know, wearing a dress made out of a garbage bag, but I'm pretending like it's the latest Paris fashion. So I do whatever I can to just make people relax, have a great time. And I also combine all different kinds of people. It's not just a bunch of songwriters and artists, you know. if you're a plumber, and I think that you have a certain kind of brain frame you're in. So it makes the parties way more interesting, too. But that's really where the collection kicks in, because someone could be here and not talk to anyone, yet they would have a really interesting time just because of what they're seeing.
Does it make you at all nervous to turn your friends loose in your home with all this valuable stuff?
You know what? Over all of the years, up until last year, I was only missing 2 things. And then last year I had a party. It was the first time in a long time I had a party with a lot of people I didn't know, because I was doing it as a charity thing. And there were 3 things missing. And that was like, oh, my God, I can't, it's like after all these years. So I always have had people that you would not know were actually there to keep an eye on things. And I always said, like, I don't want anyone to think that you're looking over their shoulder or watching what they do. Now it's like, make sure someone knows you're there and you're watching. There's so many little things. It's very easy to just pick something up and you're gone. I hate that I have to think about that because I never did before.
But the Kitsch cops are on the case.
The Kitsch, oh, that's good. Yes, the Kitsch cops are on the case. But then, I always have contests and the prizes are just like ridiculous.
I keep thinking of those Michael Jackson nightlights. Is that what the winners of the games get, or the losers?
No, that was just the souvenirs. Everyone got them. Also, in my live shows, I always have auctions. And you get, I call them certificates of authenticity. And, from the Allee Willis Museum of Kitsch. And at the shows, it's crazy. I approach the shows not as a songwriter. I approach these shows as a party host. They're very loose. There are things going wrong all the time, which makes it funnier. Also takes pressure off me. If something doesn't work, I don't freak out. I do all my songs as sing-alongs. And then these auctions are spread throughout the show. They built up to such a frenzy that I get ridiculous prices at the auction for stuff. Certain things I make sure I have enough of just because I feel like I'm known for it. So there's always going to be like a disco lunchbox and thermos. But other stuff, especially if there's a theme, they're very specific to the theme. But I auction off anywhere from 10 to 40 things every show.
And I have to admit, you had me at Disco Lunchbox.
Yeah, well, that's probably the second most important area of my collection. I love disco. I will defend disco till the day I die. It was just this very, very happy, incredible pop culture moment, but I have just tons of disco stuff. That it's hard to control myself with.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
So I think I read someplace that James Brown once serenaded a dog at one of your parties. Is that true?
No, we wrote a song about my dog, and he came up with the idea, and I have a video of us writing it. So I show that at the shows sometimes. But yes, he was in love with my dog, Orbit, who was just this plain brown, looked like a baked potato on 4 toothpicks. And he was in love with James Brown's mink coat, which he'd wear it over here in the middle of the summer. And so he would just hump the coat, and James Brown loved him. So we wrote a song it wasn't a full song about Orbit, but a lot of people have seen it because I do play it at the shows sometimes.
Sounds like everyone had fun. James Brown, you, the dog.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not the coat.
Yeah, and I will say this about James Brown. It's why I liked him so much and we got along so much. He appreciated this collection like no one else. He just absolutely loved being in this house. He would just turn around and laugh. That's always good for me when I'm working with someone who appreciates the aesthetic. And pretty much, at this point, I don't work with anyone unless they do. But, by this point, like the house, the collection, it's gotten so much written about it people they're kind of battered into liking it, whether they like it or not, before they even get here. Wasn't always like that. When I first started collecting, it's like people think, oh, well, this is weird. And, why don't you just have a pull-out couch or something,
How did the Pet Shop Boys react to it, or did they see it?
They were great. They had great taste, period. I didn't meet them as a songwriter. I met them as a painter. And their manager had seen some of my work right when I started painting. And I got hired to go to England to do their portrait for their fan club stationery. It was right after West End Girls came out. And they were literally posing for me. And Neil, the lead singer, he had been a music journalist. So he really knew like producers, songwriters. And they said to me, well, why haven't we seen your art before? And I said, because I only started painting a few months ago. And Tom, the manager, saw the work, and that's why he brought me over. I'm really a songwriter. And Neil, as a joke, said, you're not that Allee Willis on those Earth, Wind and Fire records, are you? So it was the perfect setup. I mean, how could someone give me a better lead? So when I said yes, he almost fell over. So I stayed an extra week and we wrote and demoed What Have I Done to Deserve This? Yeah, it was good. I love when stuff comes around like that, where I'm meeting someone for a completely different set of circumstances. It doesn't have anything to do with music, but then they kind of stumble on it and it's like, oh, okay. So I've had some great collaborations happen that way.
And as the Washington Post referred to you, you're the most interesting woman that you've never heard of, or?
Yeah, which I, completely agree with. I always say I'm the world's best kept secret. This year, it's, been a little different because of the Songwriters Hall of Fame, that got like so much attention. But yeah, I mean, my favorite question is when someone says, well, what do you do? And I say, I'm a songwriter. And they go, well, have you written anything I would know? That's my favorite question in the world. Because it's like, yeah, sit down. You're about to be here a long time.
And you're up to the challenge.
Oh, I'm totally up for it. Yeah.
One last question for you, and it's music related.
Yeah.
What is harder to define, Kitsch or the Neutron Dance?
Well, I know exactly what Neutron Dance is. So I would say Kitsch is harder to define, but I can tell you what the Neutron Dance is if you want.
Please do.
It was originally written for a film called Streets of Fire. And all I was told was that there was a nuclear holocaust and, this handsome guy and this cute girl and a black doo-wop band were the only people to escape the nuclear holocaust, and they're on a bus riding out of town. I mean, it just sounded so stupid to me. And I pretty much always wrote and still do autobiographically. And at that point, it was the first time I was having a lull in my songwriting career since September had come out. I was just very frustrated and didn't really know what to do. And I just thought, well, there's always the threat of nuclear war. So if your life is not working, it's up to you to make a change, because someone could push the button tomorrow and we would all go up in smoke. So that to me is what the Neutron Dance is. Get up, do what you need to do before the world ends, because if it does, you will never have lived life as a fully satisfied person. I don't know if you know this, but Pravda, which was the official newspaper of the communist government, they mistranslated Neutron Dance as Neutron Bomb, and I was named one of the most dangerous subversives living in the United States. That made me happier than anything that's ever happened to me. And that to me is so kitschy, where I just became an example of what it is that I kind of glorify.
And had they been nicer to you, they could have gotten to one of your parties and seen you were
absolutely, yes. Well, what was funny is that I had a birthday party coming up and I didn't have a theme for it yet. So I did it in a very kitschy way. I called it the Borscht Belt birthday. And like the souvenirs I made, they were like little Russian red potatoes that I drilled holes into, put a string through it, put the little jewels on it. Those were called like, Spudniks. And in order to get served borscht, which is what, was being served, you have to like pound a shoe on the counter and just, the most blasphemous way that you could have treated any of this. So I get very happy when I have a theme to play off of.
So this story has two happy endings. One is you got a really great party theme out of it.
Yes.
And the other is the Neutron Dance wound up in a much better movie than Streets of Fire.
Oh my God, did it ever. And it also, I had no idea that Beverly Hills Cop had anything to do with Detroit, where I grew up. And Eddie Murphy, through a lot of the film, wears a T-shirt that became the #1 best-selling T-shirt that year that said Mumford on it. And that was my high school. So here was the song that originally wasn't even written for that film that made me, like, to this day, an absolute hero at the high school, and a movie that there are still posters of Beverly Hills Cop up. You'll walk into a soul food restaurant and there the poster will be. That was pretty great, and I ended up with 2 songs in there, so I was pretty happy about that.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And it won a Grammy, so it all had a very happy ending.
Indeed. Well, Allee, that's everything I've got for you. I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me and for describing all the whimsical contents of your house.
Absolutely. And will you let me know when the podcast is ready and give me a link and everything?
I sure will.
Great. Well, let me know.
Will do. Thanks again so much, Allee.
Yes, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, it sounds as though Allee Willis has seen and done it all, including annoying the Soviets. And clearly, there's no stopping her. She still performs live regularly, throws her wild parties, and celebrates Kitsch in every room of her very own wonderland. In short, she still marches to the beat of her own drummer, which has to be easier now that Sammy Davis Jr.'s pot is out of that drum set. For Keeps is a production of me, David Peterkowski. My heartfelt thanks to Songwriters Hall of Famer Allee Willis for chatting with me about her mind-blowing collection of Kitsch. In the show notes, you'll find a link to Allie's online Museum of Kitsch, as well as a link to a video tour of her home by Allison Martino, the creator of the Vintage Los Angeles Facebook page, and another recent guest here on For Keeps. The show's theme song is by the band Still Flyin. The closing theme is by Eric Frisch, and additional music for this episode was by Funk LeBlanc. Pardon my French. You can visit the show's website at forkeepspodcast.com, or follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at forkeepspodcast. And you can help spread the word on For Keeps by visiting the show's listing on Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review. Thanks for listening to For Keeps. Until next time, keep on keeping on.